Hello and welcome to the channel. For today's tutorial, I'll be drafting a palazzo jumpsuit with side flounce and also with an open slit sleeve. Please stick to the end of the tutorial. So I'll start today's tutorial by drafting the lower part of the jumpsuit, which is the trouser part. So I'm going to get the length of the jumpsuit I'm working with. So the length I'm working with is 41 inches and I added 2 inches for folding or turn up allowance. So coming up to the upper part of my pattern, so I'll mark my waist at the starting point of my brown paper, that's my pattern paper, and I'm going to mark my trouser half length, which is at 21. So your trouser half length is your waist to your knee length. From there, I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to mark 8 inches for my hip line. So for a much taller person, you can go ahead and mark 9 inches. After marking the dots for the hip, I'm just going to take my rule and I will connect. After drawing that, I'm going to indicate that point as my hip point. So I'll pick my tape and I'll place it at my waist point. After my hip, I'm going to mark the crotch I'm working with. So the crotch line I'm working with is 10 inches. So I'm going to make a dot across my pattern at 10 inches point, and I'm going to take my rule and I'll connect a line. I'll connect the lines. I'll go ahead and I'll use my marker and write there as my crotch line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to pick my tape and I'm going to mark my tie line or my lap. So it's usually 2 or 3 inches after the crotch line. I'm going to take my tape and I'll mark 2 inches from my crotch line. So for a much taller person, it's advisable to mark 3 inches. So I'll take my ruler and I'm going to connect the line. So I'll go ahead and I'll write lap to indicate my tie measurement. You can also write TL indicating tie measurement. So at my hip point, I'm going to mark the hip circumference divided by 4 and I'll be adding 1 inch for sewing allowance. Trouser does not require much allowance, but I won't be using my exact hip measurement because it's a palazzo trouser and is a bit free at the upper part up to the end of the trouser. So if the hip circumference you're working with is 38, you're going to add 1 inch, making it 39. So you're going to do 39 divided by 4 plus 1 inch sewing allowance. So I'm just going to mark at that point. So after marking that at that point, I'm just going to mark my 1 inch for sewing allowance. So what I'm going to do is I'll place my tape at my hip. So whatever I have at the hip point, I'm going to extend it down to the crotch measurement. And after doing that, I'm also going to extend it back to the waistline measurement. So after marking at the waist point, I'm going to connect all those lines that I extended from my hip to my crotch and my waistline, drawing a straight line. So for clarity's sake, I'm going to repeat what I did. So I took the measurements at the hip and I extended it to the crotch line and the waistline. Then I connected, drawing a straight line. So the next step I'll be taking from here is to insert my waist circumference. Starting from that line I marked, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 and I'll be adding 1 inch for sewing allowance. So you can go ahead and add 0.5 if you want to, because trouser does not need much allowance. From my waistline, I'm going to connect it down to my hip point. So I'll place my French curve and I'm going to draw a line connecting my hip down to my waistline. So the next thing we're going to do is to find the crotch point. So by that, you're going to measure what you have at your hip, the distance at your hip, and you're going to divide it by 4 inches. First of all, I'll take my ruler and I will extend the line at my crotch line. So just like I said, I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to measure the distance at my hip point. Then I'm going to divide it by 4 inches, and whatever I have, I'm going to place it in front and I'm going to mark. So after dividing, I have 2.7 and I'm going to mark at that point. So I'll still extend my line to get to that 2.7 mark that I have there. So from that point, I'll be drawing my crouch line. But first, I'll be tracing it out with a pencil to make sure what I'm going to draw out will be good for the crouch. So after doing that, I'll go ahead and I'll use my marker and I'll outline what I have at that point. The next step I'm going to take is to divide my pattern into two. So to do that, I'm going to take the measurement at my crouch. So whatever I have, the distance at my crouch, I'm going to divide it into two. And I'm going to mark that from the beginning of my pattern to the end of my pattern. So watch how I'm going to do that. So whatever I have, I'm just going to mark it at the center of my crouch line. Then I'm going to place it at my hip point and I'm going to mark. So going down to my trouser half length, I'm going to place it from the starting point and I'm going to mark. So for clarity's sake, I'm just going to explain. So at your crouch line, if you measure the distance, you're going to divide it by 2. So if you divide it by 2, let's say you get 6.5, you're going to mark 6.5 starting from the beginning of your pattern, and you're going to mark it at your waistline, your hip, your crouch, and down to all your measurements. So I forgot to mark it at my lap or my thigh measurement. You can go ahead and also mark it at that point. So the next thing you're going to do is to place your rule and you're going to connect those lines. So please, at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification button to get new updates from my channel. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for always watching my video and supporting my channel to this point. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel, drop your comments or leave your comments at the comment section, give this video a thumbs up and also share. So let's go back to the drafting. At the thigh or lap line, I'm going to extend the line out. So you're going to be inserting your lap measurement at the thigh line or the lap line. So what you're going to do is what you have at your thigh, the measurement you have, you're going to divide it by 2. So after dividing it by 2, you're going to share that measurement into 2 sides of the line. So you're still going to fold it back again. So whatever you get at this point, you're going to share it at both sides. So for clarity's sake, if your lap measurement is 22 inches, because it's a palazzo, you're going to add 1 inch, that makes it 23, plus your sewing allowance, which makes it 24. So you're going to divide that 24 into 2 and you will have 12 inches. So that 12 inches, you're going to share it at both sides of your thigh measurement. So sharing it at both sides, you'll be having 6 at one point and 6 at the other point. So moving over to the trouser half length, you're also going to repeat the same thing at your trouser half length. At your knee, you're going to measure your knee circumference round your knee, and you're going to add 1 inch for ease if you want to. Because this is a palazzo trouser, I'll be adding 1 inch. So the 1 inch is not a constant. You can add more or you can decide not to add at all. And you're also going to add 1 inch or 0.5 inch for sewing allowance. After doing that, you're going to divide what you have. If your knee round is 18, you're going to add 1 inch, making it 19 for ease, and then you're going to add 1 more inch for sewing allowance, making it 20 inches. And that 20 inches, you're going to divide it by 2. By the time you're done, you will have 10 inches. So that 10 inches, you're going to be sharing it equally on both sides of the trouser. So sharing that 10 inches, you're going to fold your tape this way, and you're going to measure half of the 10 inches on one side and half of the other one on the other side. So sharing it, I have 5 inches at one side and 5 inches at the other side. So going down to the lower part of your trouser, the exact thing we did at the thigh and at the knee, that's what you're going to do at this point. So you're going to divide the measurement you have at the lower part of your trouser into 2. So after dividing it, whatever you have, you'll be sharing it on both sides of the trouser, which means you're going to fold back your tape, or you're going to divide it into 2 again, and you're going to mark. And don't forget to add more ease at the lower part, because it's a palazzo trouser and the down part of the trouser is meant to be very free. So the next step I'm going to take is to connect my line from my crouch to my thigh line to my trouser half length and down to the trouser length. So I'm going to also connect it at the other side. So afterwards, I'm going to be drafting for the back pattern. So before I do that, I'm just going to connect my lines first. So the next thing you're going to do is to draft your back pattern. So for your back pattern, there's no much to do. It's just to add 2 inches allowance to your front pattern. So I'm going to do that just now. And also for your crouch part, you're also going to be adding the 2 inches allowance too. For the other side of the pattern, you're just going to trace it out exactly. So first, I'm going to place my tape and I'll mark a dotted line. I'll measure 2 inches and I'm going to create a dot at my hip side, at my waist, my crouch, and I'm going to do that down to my pattern. After doing that, I'll go ahead and I will connect the line. So you can go ahead and just mark out your line if you know that it's going to be straight. For the that part of the trouser, I'll be doing it directly on the fabric. So with this, my back pattern is ready. So first, I'm going to place it on a fabric and I'm going to cut out for my back pattern. Then I'll trace my front pattern. So I've placed my pattern on a fabric and I've cut out, and this is what I have for my back. So going over to the front, I've cut out the 2 inches and this is what I have. So going over to the upper part of my measurement, I'm going to be drafting the top part of the jumpsuit. So I've marked my vertical measurement, which is my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and shoulder to waist length. So now I'm going to mark the neckline. So I'm going to measure 3 by 6 inches because it's a V neckline. So after making the dots, I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw my neckline out. So the next thing I'm going to do is to place my tape and I'm going to mark shoulder divided by 2 plus ½ inch because I'm attaching sleeve to the dress, so which leaves me at 7.5, and I'm going to mark. After marking that, I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. After that, I'm going to take my ruler and I'll connect to the neckline, drawing the shoulder slant. After drawing out the shoulder slant, I'll place my tape at that point and I'm going to mark the chest line. To get your chest line is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, which keeps me at 7 inches. At that 7 inches mark I made, I'm going to place my ruler and I'll draw a line. I'll draw out the line with my pencil. So I'll place back my ruler and I'll mark at that 7 inches line. After marking that 7 inches line, I'll go back and I'll place my tape at that point. I'm going to find the middle of my armhole circumference and I'm going to mark 3.5. So from that 3.5, I'm going to go in by ½ inch. From that ½ inch, what I'm going to do is to place my French curve and I'm going to draw my armhole curve. After outlining my armhole, I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to outline the armhole curve. Next step I'll be taking from here is to insert the body circumference. At the bust point, I'm going to measure the bust divided by 4 and I'll be marking the sewing allowance. So the bust circumference I'm working with divided by 4 gives me 8.3 and I'm going to add 2.5 inches allowance because I'm also going to be adding a dart to this pattern. Going down to the under bust, I'm going to place my tape at the under bust circumference and I'm going to mark the under bust circumference divided by 4, which gives me at 7, and I'm going to add 2.5 inches allowance. Also at the down part, I'm going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4 plus 2.5 inches allowance. So next thing I'm going to do is to draw out the lines that I have made. So I'm going to connect from my under bust to my waistline and from my under bust down to my bust line and to my chest line. So from there, the next thing I'm going to do is to mark my dart intake. For my dart intake, I'm going to mark bust band divided by 2, which keeps me at 3.5. So I'll mark it at my under bust and at my waistline. So I'll place my tape back at my shoulder, and from my shoulder I'll mark my shoulder to bust point plus 1 inch. So at that point I'm going to make a dot. I'll go back and I'll also mark my bust span. So from there I'll place my ruler and I'm going to draw a line connecting all the points that I have made. The next thing I'm going to do is to place my tape and I'll mark ½ inch at both sides. So from that ½ inch, I'm going to place my ruler and I'll connect at both sides, marking out my dart intake. So with that, our front pattern is ready and I'm just going to cut out what I have at this point. Going down to the back pattern, I've already marked out 2 inches for my zipper allowance. So whatever measurement I'm going to take will start from that point. So I'm going to show you an easy hack for you to draft your back without wasting much time. So first, I'm going to mark the neckline, which is just 3 inches by 1.5 inches for the back because I want my back to be a bit high. So after doing that, I'll place my French curve and I will draw my neckline, and I'm also going to extend the neckline down to the zipper area. Afterwards, I'm going to place my front pattern on my back pattern this way, and I'll make sure the neckline aligns because the neckline I used for the front was the width was 3 inches, and also for the neckline for the back is 3 inches. So I'm just going to place my pattern this way and I'm going to pin it down. So after pinning it down, what I'm just going to do is to trace out what I have round, or you can as well cut it directly on your pattern. But before cutting it, you're going to make sure it's relaxed so that you're going to get the exact same body measurement. So after cutting out, my back pattern is ready, as easy as anything. So you don't need to start stressing yourself. So this is what I have at my back pattern. So after doing that, I'll place back my pattern, my front pattern on my back pattern. So I'm just going to mark my bust point and my under bust point. I'm just going to make a mark there. So with this mark, I'm able to know where my dart intake will be. But if you have a tracing wheel, you can trace out your dart line. So I'll go ahead and I'll mark my dart for my back. So to mark your dart, I'm just going to take my shoulder to bust plus 1 inch, and from that point I'm going to measure from the zipper allowance, and I'm going to measure 3.5 inwards, and I'm going to do it down to the down part of my pattern paper. After doing that, I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line. After drawing a straight line, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch at both sides, and I'm going to connect it drawing a dart. So here my dart for the back is ready. So after doing this, you're going to get rid of puff at the back of your dress. So the next pattern is drafting of your sleeve. So what you're going to do is, after measuring your armhole circumference, you're going to divide it by 2. After doing that, you're going to add 1 inch in front of your pattern. So you're going to take your pattern and you measure the armhole circumference you have at that point. So whatever you have, you'll be transferring it on the paper. So why you're doing this is so that your armhole will be exactly the same with your pattern. After doing that, you're just going to place your tape starting from that 1 inch, and you're going to make sure the measurement you have is the same with the armhole circumference, and you're just going to draw your armhole curve. So after drawing that down, if you notice on my pattern, I have my elbow measurement. So you're going to measure from your shoulder to your elbow, and from your shoulder down to your sleeve length. So at my elbow, I'm going to insert the measurement I have around my elbow. So at this point, I'll be dividing it by 2, and whatever I have, I'm going to start from that line. So at my sleeve, I'm also going to sleeve length. I'm going to measure what I have round my sleeve length, and I'm going to divide it by 2, and I'm going to mark. So afterwards, I'll be adding 1/2 inch for seam allowance. So you can go ahead and add 1 inch if you like. So from there, I'm going to take my ruler and I'll connect the lines from the upper part down to my elbow and down to my sleeve length. Afterwards, I'll go ahead and I'll take my scissors and I'm going to cut out the sleeve. So after cutting my sleeve, what I'm going to do, at that 1 inch I left, I'm going to slit it open. So the reason why we're doing this is because we're trying to create an opening at the slit. So we're trying to create this open slit sleeve, just like I said earlier. So the next thing I'll do is to take my pin and I'm going to pin this sleeve at the upper part at that 1 inch line. So if you're actually sewing this on your pattern directly, you're going to sew about 4 to 5 inches down from your shoulder line. So I'll just pin about 4 to 5 inches down, and I'm going to leave the rest of the sleeve open. So you're going to flip open your pattern this way and you're going to iron it. So if it's your sewing material that you're cutting directly on, you're going to either top stitch it or you're going to add hemming gum to that part. So by the time you turn it to the right side, this is what you have. So at the lower part, so you're going to cut out a band at that point, which is your second round bound measurement, and you're going to sew to hold it down. So I will be doing a proper explanation when I'm sewing it. So going down to the flounce part of the pattern, so I'm going to use this paper to do a little illustration on how to cut a flounce. So I'm going to fold this pattern paper into 4 because I'm trying to find my middle. So for your fabric, you're just going to fold it into 4 and you're going to find the center. So I'm also going to draw a line cutting across the pattern paper, the line I made at the center. So from there, I'm just going to use a particular measurement to illustrate. So this measurement is not the actual measurement I'm going to use for my flounce. So if you're working with 1.5, you're going to mark 1.5 round this line that I made following it. So I'll mark 1.5 at this point, and I'll also mark 1.5 at this point also. So going to the other part, you're going to start your 1.5 measurement from here. So you're going to mark 1.5, and you're also going to mark 1.5 here. You're going to continuously mark 1.5 round the dots, following the same pattern and the same line. So the next thing you're going to do is to start connecting the line. So you're going to start from those first 1.5 you made, and you're going to connect it. So you connect this point to this other point. Then on reaching here, you're going to connect it to the next point. After connecting it to that other point, you're going to still connect it down to this point. Sorry that my flounce is not really circled. This is just an illustration to show you how to cut a flounce. You're going to continue this in a circular motion until you get to the last dot. From there, I'll cut out the flounce, and you're just going to fold it to any direction to create a design. After cutting out, we have come to the end of the tutorial. Please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification button to get new updates from my channel.